is Jim Colucci. Today is June 19th, 2013, and I have the pleasure of conducting an interview with Jeffrey Tambor for the Archive of American Television here in Long Island, New York. Camera speeds. So let's start with the easiest question you'll get all day. What was your name at birth?
Jeffrey Michael Tambor.
And when and where was that?
San Francisco, July the 8th, 1944.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in San Francisco. All my life didn't move away till I went to my first actually summer, sort of a summer repertory thing in Colorado, 16 years old.
Oh, in high school years. What were your parents' names and what did they do?
Dad was Bernard Tambor. He had no middle name. He was a floor contractor and then the owner of a store called Floorcraft in San Francisco in the Mission District. And then they had a store in San Jose. Mom was just a housewife.
And what traits do you think you inherited from them?
Oh my God. We
See,
don't have enough film. Dads, they were second generation Russian, Hungarian, although we say Prussian for some reason, because that boundary always kept changing depending on who was in power. So, and Jewish. We grew up conservative Jewish, and they were very, very loving, wonderful people. Very verbal, very funny, very dry. Dad worried a bit about finances always, even though when he was well off. And they were very, very worried that I was going into show business, but I fooled them. I didn't. Oh, I did. Wait a minute.
Do you have siblings?
Mm-hmm. I had an elder brother, Larry Richard Tambor, who passed away, and I have a sister who's living out in California, Jody Michelle.
And where are you in the birth order?
I'm in the middle. I was the youngest. I was the middle. I was the oldest. I've been all around. I'm everything.
What were your interests growing up?
I got interested in theater very, very, very early. I lived across the street from the theater, San Francisco State College, and I got earlier than I mean, I did the. I mean, I didn't like school too much until later, and then I really liked it. But I loved drama, and legend has it, although it's a little hazy, that I got on a bus when I was very young and went and took an acting class at Abbott Abrams Productions in San Francisco, and downtown. And I remember it was the road company of My Fair Lady that was taking classes as well on this Saturday morning, and we did things like Be a Tree and all of that stuff. And my parents had no idea.
How young was this?
Very young. I'm somewhere between, it's 9, 10, 11, getting on and doing that. I think my Uncle Dave told me about it and made a call. I was way out of my league, and I think they just kind of, just said, well, I mean, he's here, so do something with him. But I think it was a favor, but I do remember that. And I remember my parents being really surprised that they didn't believe that, where were you? And I'd come home and I'd done that, and that was sort of how I did it. I sort of did theater in the back door.
And I presume that leads to how you got into it. I want to get to that in a minute. Is there tape on that? Do you think we have tape of that young audition somewhere?
I don't think I auditioned. I think I just started taking classes.
Oh.
I don't think tape was invented then.
Well, speaking of invented, when do you remember first having a television, and what did you watch?
That's very interesting. We lived in a place called Daly City. I remember we had everybody remembers the same thing, those dials, right? Everything all right? those dials. And oddly enough, I remember two things. I remember watching Howdy Doody, but I also remember when I was very young, the Army McCarthy hearings. And I actually remember that guy saying, Senator McCarthy, have you no decency, sir? I remember watching it.
That leaves an impression. You were young when
Yeah, I went. So here I said, "Wow, whatever that box is can do from Howdy Doody to Army McCarthy hearings."
Where did you go to high school, and what subjects interested you?
Abraham Lincoln High School. Then I was full-fledged onto drama. I had made my decision. I made my decision very early. Nothing pleased me quite like that. Actually, at Aptus Junior High School, there was a guy named Mr. Pravatoni. Am I out of? Should I talk about this?
Sure.
There was a guy named Mr. Pravatoni who sort of introduced me to drama, and I would say he was my first mentor in terms of. I was rehearsing a play. I think it had something to do with the title Elmer, and for some reason I was playing Elmer. We were rehearsing, and for some reason I left the text and I started moving around and doing some stuff. I don't quite remember, but whatever it wasn't what we were supposed to be doing. And I remember the girl I was acting with leaving the scene and looking out and saying, Mr. Pravatoni, Jeffrey's not doing it right. And Mr. Pravatoni shouting from the auditorium, leave him alone, he knows what he's doing. And that was one of those moments where I went, oh, I know what I'm doing. And up until that moment, although my parents were loving and they tried as hard as they could, I'd never heard that before. No one had ever told me I knew what I was doing. And I went, I know what I was doing. And cut to San Francisco State, but I knew that whatever I was doing was sort of, the only way I describe it, I do a lecture tour now and I go around and I talk about that moment. And writers talk about it, artists talk about it, when you're in that, for want of a better word, groove, you feel you have access and you sort of know who you are and you kind of know your purpose. And that sounds flowery, but that's basically one of those moments. And I've had that moment revivified, well, maybe 3 or 4 times where you just, but that was the first time. And I said, this is very, very powerful. And I think decisions are made subconsciously and consciously from that moment on, and you don't. So, Mr. Prav, I think about him all the time. He looked like Steve Allen, and he was so cool. He was just. I hope this is true what I'm saying, but he was just so cool. He just knew what a kid was. I mean, and wonderfully so. It was great. It was great. I loved him.
It's nice to get the validation in the field you have your heart set on,
yeah,
and get it that early. I mean, that's a great gift to a kid.
Absolutely, and I listened to it. It was so powerful, and I have kids now, and I watch them, and they know they're 3 years old. My youngest ones right now, and they know. They know. We know things. We know things.
Now, you mentioned San Francisco State. Is that where you went to college?
Went to college. I lived across the street from that college. There is apparently a sign up, because people who go to, you know about this sign? There's a sign up down by the wharf, and it's a sign from, I guess, San Francisco State alumni or something about San Francisco State University. And one of the flags says, I'm an actor because of that place, Jeffrey Tambor. And my agent saw it and took a picture, and my student saw it, took a picture. So that's very interesting.
So, but to clarify, you lived across the street from it, but then you
I did.
also...
I went and I walked. I went across the street, and I would watch rehearsals. then I thought they were 80-year-old actors. Looking back on it, they had to be 16, 17 years old. And I remember they were doing these particular actors were in a scene study class, and they were talking about, they were rehearsing. And they would stop, and then they would take it apart. And they would talk about it. And they would put it back together, and it would get better. And I went, well, wouldn't that be interesting if you could do that with your life? I mean, just stop your life, rehearse it, and get better. There was just something wonderful about it. And they call it ladies and gentlemen of the theater. But those guys were so nice to me, and there I was sitting in the 5th row and looking at them, and they would include me, and I would help strike the set. And I remember taking the rock that was made out of celastic and lifting it, and I was saying, whatever this is, whatever they're doing, I have to do it. So I later went to a children's theater class there, and then I went to college there for the grand sum of $48 a semester. That's not a unit. That's a semester, because we had a benighted governor named Pat Brown, whose mandate was that every student who was qualified deserved an education. So the state college system was brilliant. And I had a faculty that was just brilliant. I just owe my life to that place.
Well, speaking of the faculty, I believe that's where you met one of your mentors. Is that where you met Milton Katselas?
No,
oh,
no.
Okay, where did you meet?
I met him in Los Angeles much later. I had finished And Justice for All. I had moved to Los Angeles. Craig T. Nelson and Valerie Curtin were in that class, and they recommended me studying. I went one Saturday, and I remember meeting him and he said, "Well, you don't need to study," something like that. "But if you do, come here and work with us." No, he said that in my critique. He said, "Come work with us," and so I did. And I ended up teaching there, and he and I later had a sort of a divorce. Not sort of a divorce, we had a divorce, but he was a great influence on my life, great teacher. I still, there are still notes that I got from him. And it was, it was not for pictures. I mean, there were some, Jessica from Arrested Development was in that class. Great Tyne Daly, great actors. It was really, and he was a great teacher.
What was the philosophy of acting in that school of acting? It was the Actors Playhouse, correct? What was the
Beverly Hills Playhouse.
Beverly Hills Playhouse. What was how would you describe it?
There were so many things that it was really individual. I mean, he sort of had my number. When I came in, because he caught me in a place where I was starting to rise in terms of jobs and success or whatever that is, but I still didn't quite have my ticket into this, and I certainly didn't. I didn't have that freedom yet, or I was sort of still finding my way, and he had it right. He hit me right on the button when the first critique after the first thing I did, and he freed me a lot. He was good for me.
What was how did he assess you? What was the critique?
He called me a good boy. He said you're a director's dream because you're a good boy, and that was right, because I had started to. I was starting to lose a lot of my independence. I was starting to settle down, sort of feel, how do you want it? And I was losing sort of my rebel spirit. And he caught on to that real fast. And that was good. And he said that very early in my first critique, and that was it. He was very good for me. Got me to be more individual of who I am. He and then we became very. May I? we became very good friends, and then we had a big falling out, which was this may be one of those moments, by the way. I think he taught me how to leave him, in a way. I think he was such a great teacher that he actually taught me how to depart, where I just said, that's it. And the only thing about teachers and teaching, and the reason I have trouble with teachers and teaching now, is too many teachers teach young kids to act like they wanted them to be, rather than who they are. I try when I teach assiduously to not do that. It's very hard, but I'm very thankful for those classes. I studied for a long time. It was great.
Well, and speaking of the timing, we're talking about this at post-college, right? So this is the mid to late 60s, I guess, when you
But I always liked studying.
Right.
That's my little yeshiva boy thing. I love studying, and I read. I mean, I read up till the moment we interviewed. I own a bookstore in Los Angeles, the Skylight Bookstore. When Milton and I went into that, I believe in study. I like to study.
Speaking of going back to the post-college era, so you went into the Beverly Hills Playhouse. You said as you were on the rise a little bit. What kinds of early jobs, early roles were you getting right after college? This would be the 60s, right?
Well, when I was in college, I went to Wayne State University, which was a repertory college. And I did 5 years there. I was a teacher. I also went for my PhD. I was going so many different ways. I still hadn't battened it down that I was going to be an actor, even though I was in a repertory company, walking on one night playing Caliban, walking on another night being in She Stoops to Conquer, walking on another night. It was such an education at Wayne State University. It was not theory. You put the show on, and you were on that show for 9 months, good or evil. And I remember opening in shows like 12th Night that we're not ready, we're not even good, and that you would perfect them in front of an audience, a poor audience. So I really learned on my feet. Then I went and auditioned for a thing called the Theater Communications Group, and I had a 4-minute audition that they selected me to go to Chicago. It was 2 minutes of Brecht's a Brecht piece, Edward II, and 2 minutes of Chekhov's The Boor. I went to Chicago. They always do it A to Z. I went at 8 o'clock in the morning to sign up, and I was going to go back to my hotel, get ready, prepare, warm up, get my suit on and everything like that. And they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I won't. You're not going to get to me till much later. I'm Tambor T." And they went, "We're reversing it this year. You're on." And I literally walked down the aisle, unprepared, unshaven, undressed, kind of cleared my throat and went into it. And it was a big acting lesson for me, because it sort of skewered my whole idea about preparation and what real preparation is. And I'm still working that out. And gave 4 of the most deathless minutes. I remember saying the line, "So you don't know what the first line of The Boor." I turned and I said, "Oh, you don't know what a lady is." And it got a laugh. It got a big laugh. And I went, I'm in. And I did that audition. I had an audition with every I had 14 meetings afterwards with 14 artistic directors from throughout the country, and I worked for years after that. I was in the Old Globe Theater in Louisville and Milwaukee, and I was all over the place, and did about 10 years of regional theater. And that's where I really, really learned, driving around in my little Greenbrier station with my then wife, Joyce. And I think we had a cat. And Seattle was our first place, my first professional gig, The Indians by Arthur Coppett. Oh, heady stuff. And I remember I got $140 a week. That was big money. And I remember them saying, okay, well, that's it for today. And it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, it was the first time I'd ever been released. And I had no idea what to do with my life. Because I went to college. You would rehearse, and then you would go teach, and then you would go take your classes. And you did. And that was all I was responsible for, that maybe 1 hour of rehearsal. And that was another moment when I went, you better figure out what your life is. And that was quite something. Seattle, I think our rent was $125 a month for 1 bedroom in Queen Anne Hill.
Was it during those 10 years on the road when you discovered your affinity for comedy? When did that happen?
That happened at home. Let me go back to Russian-Hungarian parents, and you better know your stuff. They tried really hard. They weren't easy. Dad was. My dad was a prize fighter in the CCC camps, and legend has it he fought with Joe Louis in a practice round, but he was a gentle giant. He was 6'3". He was a great guy, but she was tough. Eileen was tough, and you had to learn. I had to learn how to push back a little bit, and I knew if I could get them to laugh, I'd have a little time to think. It was terrible. We used to laugh about the corridors being very dangerous, and I had to learn to think on my feet, you know. And then she could be rough, and I had to learn how to. And if I could make her laugh, I could. And so that became sort of a survival mechanism, which later became a real thing. But it was. I remember deciding. I remember scoring the laugh and saying, whatever I just found will help me.
But, you know,
I later know it now because I'm very funny when I get scared. When I'm in scary, awkward situations, I'm very funny. I notice that I bring up the humor fast.
Defense mechanism, right?
Survival, yeah.
You know, a lot of the plays you mentioned are more heady or serious. So were there times during those years where you were doing comedies and thinking this is where I might, you know, really find other types of success in terms of film and television?
It's a really interesting question. Well, I always thought comedy was very, very, I still think that at the Greek festivals, that comedy was more important than tragedy. I think laughter is absolutely scientific. I mean, another one of my mentors, although he probably doesn't even know it, Mel Brooks, is a genius. I mean, he's an intellectual, so I don't find any bifurcation between those two. I've always found that really seriously funny people, and I don't think I'm funny, but I mean, people who have that bent are serious and take the hit of life pretty seriously. My wife always gets, you must, it must be so wonderful. You just sit at home and laugh all the time. It's not the truth. But I found that to be sort of a truism. Did I answer your question at all?
Yes, well, I was just going to segue from comedy into some of
your
television
I know
work.
why I answered that, because you bifurcated it between comedy and intellectual, and I said, well, I don't think there's any difference at all. In fact, if you go to a really serious, if you go to a serious place, a serious play, there are big laughs in tragedy, so I've always, my career has had that. When I was doing Max Headroom, they would say on the set, "Do you do comedy?" And I would say, and then being, do you do serious work? And I just did Phil Spector, and people say, "I didn't know you did serious work." But I like, if I were to pick a playwright who my two favorites of this. There's Feydeau and there's Shakespeare, and they're hysterical. I mean, life is funny. People are ridiculous. I find that all the time, and I thank God for the humor I learned from my parents and from my heritage. It's funny because I'm about to give a talk about this to the Jewish Federation, and that's one of the things I'm going to say is that there is this thing that maybe genetically I understand about humor. Well, we should probably cut that because that's wrong. But there is something. There's just something I get from that.
And I wasn't actually really suggesting that drama and comedy.
Just defending
What I was actually trying to get to is that when we start talking about some of your early television, it was in say Kojak, which is a detective show. But the things that if I were to say,
Kojak.
Go ahead.
Was, and it's still out there. Kojak was my first show. I had 5 lines. I think I talked to my Joan Van Ark. I think that's who it was. We went out to Grant's Tomb. It was the coldest day on record, and I was sitting out there to say I was I think a medical examiner, and I had to say this line of dialogue to Joan Van Ark, and the camera malfunctioned, and I wasn't even important enough to have a stand-in, so I stood out there, and when they said, "Well, camera's fixed now," unbeknownst to me, and I didn't, when I started to talk, my mouth had frozen. These are muscles around your mouth, and a bit like a talking anus, if you will. And it's still out there. They said, "Cut, print," and they got in their car and left. And welcome to show business. And if you look at it, it's still there. My eyes are like, oh my God, what is going on? And that's my first television thing.
Welcome to showbiz with that.
Show business.
Right. How did you come to get cast on it?
I went down in New York. I was doing a play on Broadway, and I remember, I think it's Alex Gordon, I think her name was. And it was like, went in and I auditioned. It was like, I got a Kojak. Kojak then is what Law and Order is today. I mean, New York actors just go on that show. And it was great. It was wonderful. I didn't meet Telly. But I was, cut, print, bang.
The Broadway show you were working on, was that, I was going to ask you about your debut, was
Sly Fox with George C. Scott. That was 2 years. I met with Arthur Penn, get this, the day my brother died. And I walked into his office, I think it was in the Paramount building, Upper Broadway. And I told him, I said, my brother has died and I'm getting on a plane, but I said I had to come here this morning. And we just talked, and he cast me. I had 3 lines. You look wonderful, sir. I said that 3 times. I played a servant, and I understudied Hector Elizondo. And, the fellow who played Lawyer Craven. And I went on a bunch of times. And then I took over Hector's part when I went on for him. And George C. Scott was another mentor. But when I took it over, I went on one night, and they said, "You're on. You are on." And Hector's not on tonight. He's hurt his leg. Are you ready? And I said, I went upstairs. I was in Hector's room. I put on the toupee. I remember lathering it with I was so nervous because I knew that this was it. this was that moment. This is that moment. You either move ahead in this moment or you don't. And George came into the dressing room and said, "You want to run anything?" Remember that? And I said, "No." And he was very impressed that I said, "No, I'm fine." What he didn't know or understand was that I had no idea what any of the lines were. I was just so, I was so nervous that I was absolutely calm. Walked to my place backstage, got my prop. He put his hand on my shoulder, really hard, because I think he was afraid that I was going to bolt. I had to carry him in for the opening line. Of course, he got applause, and he says the line, and then I had my first line was, and it ended with coming and going at the same time, and it got a laugh. I remember when Hector does it, but I carried him in. I put him down. The applause stopped. He said his line, and I said something, and I reversed it, and I said going and coming at the same time, and the audience went. And I remember George looking at me and saying, "Well, are you going to do this? Because this is it." I'll never forget it. And that was that second moment that happened, of that sort of Jim Pravatoni, he knows what he's doing. And then we just started, and I had to play the servant. So if there was a cup there, he would just point to the cup, and I would go and do the cup, and I would say the line. And then if I had to open the windows, he would point to the window, and it was easier than I had ever imagined. And it was much easier than all the fear that I had. And then all of a sudden I started getting laughs, and then all of a sudden I started getting applause. And then I remember at the sides of the theater, actors starting to come up from the dressing room and watching, and I started to get it. And at the end of the evening, you have to take your bow in terms of billing order. Well, I was way, way down there, even though I played the lead that night. It was way, way down there. And he stopped the audience, he came in, and he got me, and he put me stage center. And he shushed the audience, and he said, it was only George C. Scott could say, "You don't understand. This is his first time. You're going to be hearing things. All right, give it to him." And I got my applause, and it was amazing. And then there was a tradition that you go to Sardi's. And I went to Sardi's, and I got my applause, and I had my cannelloni dinner. And my agent was there, my wife was there. Shirley Rich was there, who really believed in me. You had to call her Miss Rich, because she was the doyenne of theater. You know, everybody would say when you meet her, "Don't call her Shirley." Well, of course I did, because they said it was like, "Don't call her Shirley, don't call her Shirley." I went, "Hi Shirley, how are you?" And she loved me. She was a big. That was the night. In that audience that night was Arthur Penn, because he was doing across the street. He was doing a play, Golda, with Mel Brooks' wife. Help me.
Anne Bancroft.
Thank you. With Anne Bancroft. And so he was there. And and they were breaking in Robert Preston to take over the role for George C. Scott, who was leaving per contract. And so Larry Gelbart was in town, so he was in the audience. And so when the time came for us to for them to replace Hector, they asked me. And I remember my agent saying, "We got to turn it down." I went, "Why would that be?" And he says, "I can't get an and in front of your name on the poster." I said, "I'll tell you what. You just call them back and say, 'I'm doing it.' And every night before I walk on, I'll say, 'and.'" I can't believe that. He's still around. He's a big agent now. He was wonderful. He actually gave me his name was John Kimball. One of the great pieces of advice ever was, you can't predict anything about this business. Just so what I was thinking about, I just had an acting student write me from Peru of all places, who's just been fired from her first television show. They did a pilot and they fired her. I wrote her a 10-point essay last night. And I said, I've been fired twice. And I said, I told you you'd be fired. Everyone has to be fired. And I told her how it hurts and everything like that. But per John Kimball, this is a funny business. A lot of things happen that you can't be prepared for, good and bad.
Sounds like you are an advocate of paying it forward, though. I mean, you took a lot of time to respond to her letter.
Yeah. Well, I'm her teacher, and I take that responsibility. I also know what that feels like because you can't move. This is a business. No one trains you for the business, and the business is I'm going to be 69 in a couple of weeks. I mean, even the short time that I've been in this business, 45 years, 50 years, it's changed. There's such fear now. I mean, it's people make decisions now, and for them, I feel sorry for them too, because they're going to go. I mean, everyone shakes and quakes behind the closed door. So yeah, I know what that feels like. No, 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 yes. No, 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 yes, no, 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 yes, no, 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 yes, 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 no, 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 no. You got to have your head together. You got, and you cannot live on yes and no. You cannot think that's who you are. You just can't.
Yeah,
there's got to be other things, and than that.
Gives you very little control over your own life to be waiting for yes.
Well, we don't have control anyway, so you can throw that away.
I had one other question, and then I want to move on to some more TV stuff. You know, you mentioned the toupee.
Oh, that's right. This is about TV.
Yeah, you mentioned the toupee as part of the role in Sly Fox. How long ago was it that you started with the haircut?
16.
Hector Elizondo also same haircut.
16.
16.
16. And I think my mother cried, or my father cried. Oh, which one was bald? My father. I'm kidding. Started thinning. But what was great is I went to Summerstock and played all the old men. That was what was wonderful. I think we used to put gray in our hair, that awful gray. And I remember sitting in the dressing room and pulling it out. So, yeah.
So it didn't adversely affect your career necessarily?
No. I've always played old. I never played my age. Now I'm playing my age for the first time.
So when did you decide, what point in your career, to move to LA?
I never moved to LA. I may have moved to LA, but I never moved to LA. It's a good question. When I went out to do the Ropers, I lived in a great place called the Sunset Lanai. It's still there on Sweetser. Oh, every actor lived there. Jimmy Coco lived there. Mickey Ross, one of the creators of the Ropers, and the Jeffersons, and Three's Company lived there, and he got me the apartment, and old New York actors, and I think Dean Martin lived there for a while. Anyway, it was great. And I kept going back and forth, because I had a rented apartment on the Upper West Side. And finally, we just moved there. I remember Arthur Penn saying, "Don't sign your life away." I never really understood what he meant, but now I understand what he meant. He didn't mean to actually sign your life away. He meant don't sign your life away. But I never was comfortable in Los Angeles. That's why I live in New York now. I've always been I grew up in San Francisco. I never got it. It was always nice. I don't know. It was just the Russian Hungarian man going, "What's this weather? You know, what are these people doing in tank tops? I don't understand. What's everybody smiling about? What does that have a nice day? I don't want to have a nice day. I have other plans." But I did the Ropers, went out and did the Ropers, which was interesting.
I want to get to the Ropers
Please.
In a minute, but I want to just ask you a couple of other appearances
I like
first.
Questions.
What do you remember about your appearing on Starsky and Hutch?
Oh, man. I remember causing quite a row because the character was flamboyant and
Flamboyantly gay?
well, not stated, but the inference was. And hey, I got no problem with that. But they didn't tell me that. And plus, I don't like that stereotype. I'm in charge of my own stereotypes, thank you. And if he's gay, I will play it with all the integrity and honesty I can. But I'm not going to play it that way because that's demeaning, and I don't like that. And they were, in other words, they were sort of making fun. And I, on the set, am I saying this right? I mean, am I saying this? It's all PC and everything because I grew up in San Francisco. My friends were gay. I mean, I'm not gonna slam that whole section. I'm gonna play it great, you know. So I just said, I'm not playing this on the set. I got to the set and they showed me the bandana and this and that, and I went, I'm not doing that. In fact, I'm not playing this role. They said, you cannot do that. They called my agent. They went crazy. But see, when I was so young, I didn't care. I just said, you know, I'm gone. The head of casting from NBC, Joel
Thurm.
Joel Thurm. Wow. I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? Finally, I realized it. And it was a big moment for me because I learned the power of no and the power of integrity. And I just said, you want me to do this, I do it my way. And I picked the costume and I do it this way. And of course, I also had them. And the shoot, the shoot was very interesting. I remember those two boys were not, they didn't seem to be terribly happy with what they were doing. Plus, I was talking like this and they were talking like this. I kept going, what are you saying? What? And Maud Adams was on it. Anyway, I remember just saying, whatever the spirit was on that set that day, I said, I don't want to do. But it's also Starsky and Hutch. So it was very, very interesting. I think there was a big prize fight that day. Anyway, get this. And they were all watching it on TV. But they said, well, we're going late tonight. Oh, I was doing Sly Fox there at the Schubert Theater. We're going late tonight, so I guess you won't have to, you're going to have to call the theater, and you won't be able to go on. I said, I'm leaving. And they went, no, you can't leave. And I went, watch. And I left the set. And I think they cut the rest of my scenes, as they should have. But, wow, we are brash when we are young. I wonder if I'd have the guts to do that today.
The remaining scenes, though, did you prevail in your interpretation of the character?
Yeah. And that changed my life, too. Because you speak up. Which my dad taught me. He said, you speak up. He was funny, but you ask questions and you speak up. It took me a while to speak up. And going back to Milton, that's where I started to settle down, and I had become afraid of the very power of that. Yeah, you speak up, you ask questions. At the end of the day, when you close the door, all you have is your integrity. I mean, come on. I mean, look what we're doing now. I mean, these things count.
Exactly. Nice to be able to have a good story to tell rather than have to admit to something.
Well, basically, I'm teaching people to walk off the set. That's a great story. Okay. Well, if you ever have any difficulty, just leave. That'll be good. That's my advice. Here, cheers.
So tell me about working on Taxi. You played a congressman on Taxi. Was that your first time on a sitcom?
Yeah. I had auditioned for them, and I was being considered for, I think, Jeff Conaway's role. And they were great. When I came into town, I came in with Sly Fox. I came under the umbrella of George C. Scott. I was like, you know, but I thought I was hot poo-poo, you know. I just thought I was it. I remember not learning I remember I got cast and Justice for All, and Al Pacino wanted two weeks rehearsal. Well, I said, so I can't do this. And Ed Weinberger said, "Oh, really? Well, I'm suing you. How do you like that? You can't do this." So I had to get permission to for only 1 week of rehearsal with Al, and went out and did it. But gee, it was great. It was wonderful. They were so terrific. I think then again, I didn't quite learn the line. That was very interesting because Jim Burrows, the great Jim Burrows, James Burrows was the director. But I remember getting notes, and there were these. You would go up and you get notes from one producer. Then you go to another producer and get notes. Then you go to another producer and get notes. So I went, well, what is this? Where am I? So I realized that it was a producer-driven sort of thing, but it was a wonderful role. And these things are out there now. They're just, people walk up and say, I saw a taxi, or they go boom, boom, wadum, chew from Three's Company, or it's amazing, you know. Someone just last night said, you were great on the Ropers on the, you know, the Twitter. You know, I saw every episode of the Ropers, and that's this young generation.
It's all, yeah, they're all repeats.
It's all there.
How did you get cast on Taxi? You know, again, this was your first sitcom. How did it come about? After you had auditioned, you said, for the one role.
They just offered it. Crazy senator with sweaty hands.
And what do you remember about working with that cast?
All my scenes were with Mary Lou, and she was great. We really got along. I mean, my whole problem with television when I got to it, and it took me a long while to really understand what television was, is my whole problem was I would put as much effort as if I were doing King Lear into 23 pages, which sounds meritorious, but it's actually a problem, because if you overload it, it doesn't fly. And that was a big problem with me, is that I overworked it, and almost stopped me from acting a little later, because the more successful I became, the more I worked it. And every time, it's gotten very cold in here, has it not? Every time, stop.
So you were saying about, you know, sometimes you had the tendency to overload preparation into a sitcom.
Yeah, when I remember with that particular show, just working too hard. See, but the character was sort of that. Anyway, it was great, and I remember we had a really, really good time, and you know, that was Taxi was top of its form. I mean, they had, you know, the incredible cast, you know, from Judd to Danny to Andy. My goodness.
And you said your scenes were with Mary Lou.
Mary Lou, whom I loved, and I still see her now and then. And yeah, it was a great. I mean, starting at it was certainly better than my Kojak moment. I'll tell you that one. And that was great. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I remember. I had a problem in television at the beginning of not being able to learn my lines. I'm very good in line study, still very, very good with lines. Of, oh gosh, not quite agreeing with lines. And for some reason, two of my heroes were Alfred and Lynn Fontaine, the Lunts. And I read in a book called Actors Talk About Acting, which is my Bible, that they didn't pay attention to the lines. If they didn't agree with the lines, they would say them. And I just sort of, at a very young age, took that. And I just thought that was terribly cool of me. Well, Ed Weinberger did not agree with that. But I do remember of changing a word or this and that. Again, youth. And in a way, I admire it, and I sort of, I like that.
What was their reaction when you did that on Taxi?
I remember him saying, you know, I remember him throwing up his hands and just saying, let him say what he wants. It's fine. like that, which was, if you know Ed Weinberger, that was, but it was just a battle you couldn't win with me at that point. You just, I mean, it was just something I had. It wasn't even an arrogance. It was an innocence of all things. Cut to later, I mean, with Steve Bochco later, he wouldn't print if you didn't say it correctly. And I understand that now. Now, I understand these writers have walked the floor with these lines, every and, but, or the, but I didn't know it. I didn't know it. Youth is egocentric.
Did now that you had a multi-camera sitcom under your belt with Taxi, did that influence your getting cast in The Ropers? How did that happen?
I don't know how it happened. I've often wondered what I was thinking. Oh, I know what one of the things I was thinking was they were paying me a lot of money. I mean, for a young man, I remember it was $6,000. That's a king's ransom
Per episode.
per episode. $6,000. And in my naivete, I went, well, we'll just do a couple. I mean, none of these things run, do they? And I remember Norman and Mickey Ross coming backstage. Oh, with Ted, one of the producers, Ted Bergman, coming backstage, and I just sort of let it go on. It just sort of happened. All of a sudden, I'm meeting Marcy Carsey at ABC. I'm sort of reading something. They say he's fine, and I'm doing it. And that was I had just done And Justice for All. So you have And Justice for All, and you have The Ropers, and I couldn't quite figure out what I was quite doing. And then that's sort of been my career. You go where the work is, and it was so much fun. Again, I did not understand what television was. I did not understand. I treated it like theater. I had no idea that I would say something and it would go out. But I remember it came out on a Thursday. I believe it was on a Thursday. And I was walking up the stairs of the subway on 42nd Street going to a rehearsal. And someone said, "Oh, look, there's that television actor." And I went, dong. And my life changed.
So just after the show's premiere, you were
the next day.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me about your character, Jeffrey Brooks III.
I still see him on Facebook. He was
What do you mean you still see him? A real person?
YouTube.
Oh.
He was this sort of uptight guy. And he was married to Patty McCormick, and he was the neighbor next door, the uptight neighbor next door who didn't like the Ropers. Yeah. And Nichols, Ross, and West were three sort of great magicians, and they would give you notes, and you were in charge of 23 to 32 pages of material, and maybe I had 6 a week. And then you would go in front of this audience, and they would laugh, and it was very interesting. It was just it was absolutely. I remember I would get nervous before taping. I still get nervous in taping situations. That's still a little new for me. There's an audience there, and yet there's cameras there. I much prefer one camera, but it was fun. It was fun. Norman was great.
Norman Fell, you mean?
Norman Fell, Audra Lindley, Patty McCormick, Nichols, Ross, and West. It was great.
Now, you were the main antagonist to this beloved couple, the Ropers, who were spun off Three's Company. So what was that like to be kind of the new bad guy in town when these are two beloved?
Well, there's a thing in television. There's a thing in Commedia dell'arte. There was this wonderful actor who's, people ask about influences. There was a wonderful actor named Fred Clark. and he was bald, and he had a mustache. And, in comedy, the bald man is usually the dentist, the lawyer, the principal, the teacher, for some reason. And I had fallen into that specific sort of stereotype, so it was fun. I always liked playing the bad guy. I always liked playing the antagonist. I'm about to do a film next week where I'm the antagonist. I like that.
Did you model the character on anybody you knew or have any input into it?
I was sort of unconscious at the point. I actually, at various points in my career, someone would have to go, oh, I just kind of fell into that. They thought I was wonderful. I mean, I think their appreciation of me was far better than what I was giving them. I do remember I was terribly thin, and I had my hair flipped at the back. I was an odd duck. But there's nothing more than funny than an uptight guy, And we had fun for a couple of years. Again, they were different days. And I was at Television City, Studio City. Yeah, Television City on Beverly. And what was odd about that is that my dad took us on a tour when I was maybe 8, 9 years old, and I was working in that building. In fact, our rehearsal studio is where I'm going to be going out and doing the Craig Ferguson show, was right in that studio. So that's kind of interesting.
Comes full circle.
Oh, boy, does it come for full circle.
Tell me about
circles on circles.
Tell me about working with Norman Fell and Audra Lindley.
I think they're tapping me.
They are. Actually, you know what? Let's take a break here and we'll come back to that question.